versuchen wir das Unmögliche.
Mein Name ist André.
Nein, das ist sowas nicht. Konzentration.
Welcome to Shades Tour. My name is Kenan, I'm 21 years old, I'm from Syria. For the next 2 hours I'm going to be your guide. In 2015 there was a lot of refugees who came to Austria. The civil society were helping. It was a really big welcome culture. Now it's everything different. I can tell you about my story. 2011 started a revolution at our city, and that's why I had to flee when I was 13. I fled to Turkey, and from Turkey I took a boat to Greece, to Lesbos. I liked Austria, I liked, of course, the people. That's why I decided to stay here.
I could also show you something. Nearby is the Belvedere, with the most famous kiss in the world. Love is the solution.
2015, the chef from ERSTE Bank decided to open the place for refugees. And between September and December, there's 15,000 people who slept there.
We had the best architects working for the poorest people. Vienna was, and still is, a city that really took care of workers, of poor people. And they did an enormous program with social housing, with a social school system, a health system.
Austrian integration funds. Actually, this is my favorite station because I like to talk about integration. One class would be integration class, and they would be explained about culture in Austria and human rights.
Ein wichtiger Teil der Menschenrechte ist die Religionsfreiheit. Was bedeutet die in Österreich?
Vienna is a perfect place to be born, and it's a perfect place to die here. In between, it's a little bit difficult. You have the graves of Mozart, of Beethoven, of Johann Strauss, of Schubert, of Brahms. All these geniuses of music died in this city. This is the list of the benefactors, the people who made this building possible. My grandfather, Gustav Heller, he came as a Jew from Poland, and he made it in the list with the emperor, and that's touching for me. They are rehearsing the Second Symphony by Gustav Mahler, who came from Bohemia to Vienna. The truth is, it's not New York. If you make it there, you'll make it anywhere. If you make it in Vienna, you'll make it anywhere.
I learned a lot of things, but what you have in your head is still something terrible. I cannot be thankful for the war because I learned a lot, because it broke my life as well.
Art is an answer to the negativity of the world, to the bombs, to the killing. This proves that art can heal some of our wounds, not all of them. This is Archimboldo. I love it.
Now I can show you something.
Yeah?
I think we go there to show you what's called galeb. It's from Syria, and it's for some sweet
Cookies?
Yeah, cookies we make in our holidays.
Okay. Vienna is a city of dreams and of nightmares. The nightmares of the Nazi time. Part of my relatives were killed. The lucky ones survived. Tonight's performance in the National Theatre is about the truth that everybody is connected with everybody and that we are responsible for each other. See you in Vienna, May 2020. Each year is a challenge, but 2020 was an extraordinary challenge. It taught us a lesson that we have to change our behavior and our attitude towards the world. And even the EFC conference was cancelled for the first time. It should have taken place in Vienna, but Vienna is very patient. And here we are with open doors waiting for you. Come to Vienna in 2021.
So, good morning to all of you. Obviously, you realize I'm not the original. I'm not André Heller. I'm Andreas Treichl. When we did the movie, I was the chef of ERSTE Group. Now I'm the chef of, the chairman of ERSTE Stiftung. But I brought to you the original. Here he is, the young man.
Welcome to Vienna.
So, Kenan, tell us a little bit about how you experienced the last 6 years in Vienna.
First, allow me to thank you and ERSTE Stiftung, ERSTE Bank for great help they offer to asylum seeker from 2015 until now. Also for the Austrian society, the city of Vienna, they really make it possible for a lot of people to do what they want to do in Vienna. Yeah, I think the last 6 years in Vienna were pretty good. It's great to be here, to be allowed to do what you want, to get a lot of help, but you still cannot forget that you are not only in Vienna, you are also connected with your home, especially with your family. But it was great. I could study, I start university, I'm almost done. I still have 1 semester left. I get a lot of friends and family. Sorry. Yeah, Corona time was also, for us all, not good, I think.
Was good for you? Why?
Not good was. It wasn't good. For me, it was good in a way that all my lectures was recorded, so I could always, because, you know, it's hard to study in German, especially I always had to translate something when the professor said. And since my all lectures are recorded, I could always replay them and just hear them again and translate and work more in my lectures than normally. But otherwise, it was really bad, so we couldn't meet your friend or whatever, like, yeah. The good thing that I was also I know that I was already communicating too much over online with my family because they're still in my Syria, so it was I was already kind of, I knew how to communicate online and not see people, but only see them on screen, so it wasn't a big change for me. But it was still a big change that I was only at home and cannot do other things that I would like to do.
But now you have to do a practicum, right?
Yes, I'm looking for an internship.
Is that more difficult now in the Corona times?
Yes, like students from the last years, they couldn't do any internship because companies were all closed, and now it's still hard to find an internship because a lot of companies don't really take internships.
So he's in biotech, so one of you here knows somebody in biotech, yeah?
I'm studying biomedical engineering. I'm working with prostheses, implants. Okay. I'm looking for practicum.
Okay, tell me, if I may ask, how's your family and where are they?
My family are still in Syria. They are doing well. I mean, you can't compare life in Vienna or in any other country like in Europe to Syria. It's like, you know, they have electricity in 2 hours if they are lucky in a day. They don't have like the basic stuff for life, and it's always different because there's sometimes what's called Kampflinien.
Fighting line.
Fighting line, yeah. So you always have to go in somewhere else, and especially if you leave your house or home for a few days, then you come back and find some people living there, not normal people, but it's possible that's military or any other group, so they just want to take over places. So they are fine, they say we are good, we are all alive.
But they're on the move all the time.
Mostly, yeah.
So tell me, during the last 6 years while you were in Vienna, did bad things happen to you?
In Vienna, not. I had a lot of things, bad things happen in Syria with my family, and they affect me in Vienna and also with my friends there. But in Vienna, it was mostly, it was mostly good things happening, but I was not able to always be in Vienna in my mind, even if I am here physically. That's the hard thing. But in Vienna, it was great. I get money for the city for studying. So if I get my ACTS, like my points, which makes possible for me to study, which is great. Otherwise, I have to work much, much more. Now I work less, so I can study something I like, do something I like. So in Vienna, a lot of good things happens, and only actually good things. I get to know a family, which I'm grateful to know them. I also think that they are my family here.
So while you study, you also work as a waiter once in a while.
In summer and during my study, I still work on Shades tour. Like the tour that you saw. I do some tours during like my semester, and when I have summer break, then I will work as a waiter.
So you have a very busy, full life.
Yes, you could say that.
Was it easy for you to find friends?
Yes, since I get to know, I was taking on, my family take me in when I came to Austria, Austrian family, and they were treating me like a family, and they have a child who is also a bit older than me, and he helped me a lot knowing friends here, knowing the city in Vienna, which was great. But also that this opportunity doesn't come to each asylum seeker or each refugee here. So I'm really thankful for them, but I think it wasn't that hard. And once I start my university, it was much easier to find friends.
So what do you want to do in 5 years from now?
I'm looking for. I'm really happy studying. Like I really, it's a lot of stress.
You don't want to study still in 5 years.
I think I will make a master, and maybe I will. And right now, I really like spending time learning stuff. So if I have exam in 2 days, I would not say that. I would be really. No, I just don't want this anymore. But it's a lot of interesting things. So I'm most likely looking for a master after I finish.
So I'm really happy that I can present him here. He's one of the success stories. He's one of the persons that make me proud of being an Austrian. Unfortunately, we have so many thousands cases where you cannot be proud to be an Austrian. So I'm happy that you came. You made us all happy today. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Sorry, but they are still thinking in Kenan experience. Thank you for sharing with us your experience, Kenan. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. It's unbelievable that since you elected me as chair of this organization, this is the first time that we can meet face-to-face. So it's also a very important moment for me. And it's my first opportunity to begin to repay the trust that you placed in me. So thank you for your trust. I would like just to begin this, to share a couple of lessons that I learned from these difficult times that we faced in the last months. As in the movie it was some lessons that learned. The two lessons that I chose, one is related to vaccines. We are here thanks to the vaccines. Without vaccines, we were at home probably. And thinking of how we arrived to the vaccines, I think, of course, that a lot of public investment has been done for having the vaccines. Of course, a lot of commercial investment has been done. But right in the beginning of the research on the RNA technology, it was some brief and important philanthropy grants to allow us to have this new technology that, for me, is a miracle. So it's the first lesson to show us the catalytic effect that philanthropy has in our lives. I'm very, very happy also to learn that lessons. And I would like that every single grant, every single project that we face, we will have that catalytic effect that has had those grants probably 20 years ago about biotechnology, Kenan, biotechnology. The other lesson is that we have to be clear that with the challenges that society is facing, no single organization can address that problems. So the other lesson is that coronavirus invited to work together, to join forces, because none of us individually maybe can solve the challenges that the society is living. Inequalities, climate, democracy, whatever. All those challenges, we need to join forces and to work together. And this is the other lesson that for me is important. And those days, I think, will be important to celebrate that vision that we want to work together. But to arrive here and to be here, I think I have to thank a lot of people. First, all the ERSTE Stiftung team, Andreas, Franz, Boris, Maribel. Thank you very much for your commitment, and for sure, all the team that are behind you, and for hosting so well. Also the members of the program and the host committee, I would like to thank all the time that you have spent thinking on those days. And I would like also to thank all the members of the Governing Council and management team, the management team of the European Foundation Center, for those months that have been like, crossing a dark tunnel, trying to see a light at the end. Thank you very much, and especially the EFC staff. The EFC staff has been also very supporting during all these difficult months. So, at the end, I would like to introduce Delphine Moralis now to come here and to speak to all of us. As you know, is the chief executive of the European Foundation Center, and like me, probably is the first time that most of you will meet personally. I have to say that with her background in human rights and international membership organization, and also with team management, Delphine is the perfect person to lead us into a new phase of this journey towards strengthening the voice of philanthropy in Europe. Delphine, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Àngel, for these kind words. I think it's a little bit like you, Àngel. I didn't have joining in your organization under lockdown on my bucket list. But when I look back at the support I've had from the management committee, from the team, from the governing council, and the fantastic conversations I've had with the members, I kind of feel like perhaps it was something that I should have put on my bucket list. And it's been quite a fantastic experience so far, so I'd really like to thank you. I would also like to thank you who are here with us today for the leap of faith in joining this first post-corona conference. accepting to take a PCR test, going through all the hassle that we have been sending you over the past couple of weeks, just to have that opportunity to see each other face to face instead of screen to screen. For me personally, it's really wonderful. After having seen, I think, a handful of you over the past year, I feel like my world has grown so much to now have 400 of you whom I'm actually having the opportunity to meet. So it's quite fantastic, and I'm really grateful. It's also wonderful to look back at this film that was made, I think about 2 years ago, maybe, Kenan, is that right? I mean, it's unbelievable to see how relevant it is today. You talk about try the impossible, and to be honest, a couple of weeks ago, it still felt a little bit impossible to have all of you come to Vienna and actually have a real meeting face-to-face. So I'd really like to thank also the ERSTE Stiftung for all the amazing work in making it happen. And I'd also like to thank my team for the hard work, resilience, and creativity that has come from all of them. Kenan, in the video, you also talk about how love is the solution. I think that's really beautiful. And I think if love is the solution, then definitely philia and philanthropy has a role to play, doesn't it? And then last, you talk about how everybody is connected to everybody. And in the next couple of days, we'll also talk about how everything is connected to everything. Climate, democracy, society. And today and tomorrow, it is our opportunity to think about what philanthropy's role is in that context. What is our role as bridge builders, as innovators, as grant makers, as collaborators, as knowledge brokers, to really move from crisis to opportunity and to really accelerate sustainable change. So to discuss this, I'm really delighted that I have a fantastic group of people to join me. First, let me welcome AB Albrectsen. AB has a long career in human rights, international development, and diplomacy. Her last role was Global CEO of Plan International, and she has joined IKEA very recently. Oh, what am I saying? Lego Foundation. I'm looking at Liz and I'm saying IKEA. Lego Foundation, just a couple of weeks ago, and I'm really happy that she's here with us to share her thoughts. So a very warm welcome to AB. Sorry about that. Let me also welcome Kumi Naidoo. Kumi might need a bit less introduction because I think you've had the opportunity to meet with him on a couple of occasions as well. We're so happy that you're here with us, Kumi. Kumi is a human rights and climate activist, a global ambassador of Africans Rising for Justice, and recently also served as Secretary General of Greenpeace and of Amnesty International. Very happy that you could join us today. Welcome. And Andreas, can I please ask you to join us as well to continue the conversation? So you've met Andreas already. Andreas is the founder and chairman of the ERSTE Stiftung, the former CEO of the ERSTE Bank, and also the founder of Die Zweite. Good to see you.
Go here, or?
If you could sit here, thank you. So thank you so much to all of you for joining me this morning. And I'd like to go back to you, Andreas. Thank you again for welcoming in this beautiful city where it is good to be born and good to die. And I think we can we can agree that today it's pretty good to live in Vienna as well. And maybe I'd like to start by asking you a question, Andreas. So you come from the corporate world. And in the face of the challenges that we're seeing today in the world, what is your view on the role of philanthropy? It's quite a challenge, isn't it?
No, it's not a challenge. I think I'm in this position because I basically worked my whole life in the corporate world in order to make sure that one day I could have that position. And I believe very much that we live in a time where if the corporate world doesn't understand its responsibility for the environment and for the people, and if the corporate world doesn't realize that it is their function actually to contribute to society in whatever way, and if by that the corporate world doesn't cooperate with the philanthropy world, then the world is not going to work. We are experiencing in numerous countries for the moment the decomposition of the political world, and I don't think that this trend can be stopped unless the political world feels that the corporate world and the philanthropic world are moving side by side and are demanding from politics to change the way they do politics. If the philanthropic world is alone, it's not strong enough. If the corporate world is alone, it's not credible enough. That's why these two worlds really have to join. If we don't do that, and if we don't bring the young people in Europe or in the world on our side, if we don't engage in a really, really strong connection between the philanthropic, the corporate world, and the future, we will have no chance to change the political sphere. There are so many politicians on this planet for the moment that should not be in politics and that destroy our world, that we have to do something against it, and we can only do it together.
Thank you, Andreas. I think we'll find a lot of agreement, and we'll definitely talk about that later today. And we actually have two politicians who are going to be sharing their thoughts and their struggle in the rest of this morning. So we're looking forward to that.
I said so many, not all.
Very clear, very clear. But I think it's also very relevant that you raise a point about the importance of youth. And maybe I'd like to turn to AB. AB, you were with Plan International until, I think, 48 days ago. That's when you joined Lego, not IKEA. Apologies for that. And I wanted to ask you, so you made this shift going from the NGO sector, working in child rights, to the philanthropy sector. What were you hoping for?
You know, I think in many respects this sector is indifferent, but the values that come with the work are absolutely essential. And I think there are many values we share in philanthropy with the NGOs, the local community NGOs, the corporate and political world. And when we can join that value set of the need to address the injustice in the world, address inequality, fix democracy, address climate change, I think that's where we can all be best together. When it comes to children and young people, let me just first say that I hate the phrase that they are our future. You know, the future is very, very much now, and everything we do with, for, supporting children is of absolute essential value to humanity. I think we've got to be a little bit careful about a few things. One is, you know, the Lego Foundation is obsessed with creative learning and how creativity can be unfolded in everything we do so that we can solve the biggest problems that we have. We have a little bit of an obsession with youth and children when it comes to creativity. I think what we need to do is to make children our heroes and our role models, and as adults, whether we're in politics or whether we're in the commercial world, to invite them in, to invite them to the table, to inspire us to be with us, because creativity comes with both the imagination but also the ability and the power to act. And when we can bring those two together and have the collaboration between children, youth, and adults to solve the biggest problems, that's where I see the best power. Maybe a final thought is that we do tend to put too much burden on children and youth to solve some of the biggest problems. If we're not acting, us oldies, and acting now and not waiting for them to help us, well, we want to invite them in to help us solve the problems, but it's our actions and not their actions that will help make the world better for them.
Yeah, so we have a big responsibility, I think, in the current context. And Kumi, I'd like to turn to you. A couple of years ago, you were with us. I think it was in Milan, right? Long before I joined the EFC. And if I'm right, I think what you said at the end of the conference was something around how we need to do true philanthropy and not philanthropy. So how do you think we're doing today?
Well, thank you, Delphine, and good morning, everyone. The one reflection I have for those of you who have been long-timers at EFC, my first EFC was Torino in 1998, I think. And the one thing that I must start by saying, pay a compliment, how do I put this delicately? So there were very few panels at EFC in the early days. There were a lot of manels. And I'm very happy to be on a panel to the opening session, which is gender balanced. But I would encourage EFC, obviously, to address all the other diversities that still need to be addressed. But I think the difficulty right now is we live in a moment where we are living in the most consequential decade in humanity's history. What we do in the next 10 years will determine what kind of future we'll have or whether we will have a future at all. And therefore, it is critically important for philanthropy right now to make sure that its voice is added, to make sure we don't make the same mistake we made after the global financial crisis in 2008, 2009. Because what we had after the global financial crisis from those in power was all about system recovery, system protection, and system maintenance. What was needed then, and what is critically needed right now, is system innovation, system redesign, and system transformation. If we think that we are going to get out of this convergence of crises that we are seeing, because it's a climate crisis with the inequality crisis, with the rise of fascism crisis, and many other crises, by rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic while humanity sinks, then we are completely deluding ourselves. And that would be philanthropy. The philanthropy that we needed right now is one that is courageous. As Andreas said, we have to be calling out those in leadership, especially political leadership, who are in denial about how close to the climate cliff we are, for example. And the difficulty that we find, actually, is that oftentimes now you can't find a politician who verbally doesn't disagree with the fact that we need to address inequality, that we have to address the climate crisis, that we have to address gender. The problem is there's such a huge gap between what is articulated and what is implemented. So I think that philanthropy, for it to be fully realized, has a long way to go. We are not there yet. And we must be, I would end by saying that for philanthropy to fulfill its entire promise, it needs to be typified by the following words. The most important word is humility. Right? I think humility is really important. Secondly, I think you have to be listening to the ground and listening to the people who are most affected. And that's why I thought starting today's session with the young man from Syria was exactly the kind of approach that you need. Listen to the people most affected by problems. And thirdly, be willing to imagine a world very different from what we live in. And that's why my last comment would be on youth, and to support every single word that you said, and say that the one thing that young people can give us right now is something that as older people we just don't have, which is the freshness of perspective. Sometimes when my daughter was younger and I would say to her, darling, based on my experience, you shouldn't do this. She said, Dad, the problem with your generation is you're contaminated by bad experience and you're constantly pushing that bad experience on us. And I think right now, this has to be a time of imagination, a time of thinking very differently, and courageous philanthropy will be supporting those who are presenting inspiring visions of greater equity, greater unity, greater harmony, as well as addressing the reality that we live on one finite planet, and unless we learn to share it in a more equitable way, we are not going to be able to secure our children and their children's futures. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kumi. And I think, of course, the climate change is one of the key topics that we'll have in the conference today. And thank you for reminding us, indeed, that if we don't act now, we might not have a chance to do that tomorrow. So it is really upon us to do everything we can in the current context. And I'd like to turn maybe to the audience to ask you a question. So I'm going to tell you, share a statement. And if you agree, you raise your hand. If you don't agree, you just wait for it to pass. So my statement is, in the context of the current climate crisis, every foundation should be a climate foundation. By that I mean that you should whatever your mission is, whatever your focus is, have a climate lens to everything that you do. If you agree, please raise your hands, or both. If you agree very much, if you don't, wait for it to pass. So, Kumi, let's maybe stay with you a little bit. That looks relatively promising.
Yes. It looks promising.
And you know, the good news is we've seen an increase in the amount of giving that goes to climate. So that's really good news, I think. We've seen an increase in the amount of commitments, but also in the size of grants from philanthropy. But if we look at it in the bigger scheme of things, it's still only 2% of Europe's philanthropic giving that goes to climate. And within that, only a very few grants go to more radical approaches. Only 4% goes to public engagement strategies, and only 1.9% goes to doing something else than rearranging the decks, the chairs on the Titanic, you know, to really rethink a new economic model that is not focused solely on growth. How does that make you feel?
I think first we have to redefine what we mean by climate. Mm-hmm. I think one of the biggest mistakes we've made is we ignore the wisdom that was given to us as the biggest gift from the feminist movement decades ago with the notion of intersectionality. So if we embrace intersectionality in its fullest sense, then what you are doing with young people is potentially part of the climate struggle. Basically, the reason we have a climate crisis is because of an economic system, an energy system, a food system, a transport system. All of these systems have actually driven us to this point where we are. Right? So if you are addressing any one of those, potentially you're actually addressing the climate challenge. But right now, I think the one thing that philanthropy needs to deal with is inconsistencies with the climate struggle. So if you are from a foundation that is still generating income, right, from investments that you have in the fossil fuel industry or in companies that are deforesting the Congo Basin, Amazon, or the Sumatran rainforest, for example, then you need to clean that mess up, right? Because basically, you cannot on the one hand be saying that we are supporting climate programs when in fact the source of that money is generated from actually causing the climate problem, right? Now, I know many foundations have addressed this and are beginning to address it. I realize you can't just click your fingers and do it overnight. But on the other hand, your colleagues on the other side of the pond in the US have actually done quite well. They're not there yet either, but I think there's a need for acceleration to address that. And then I think the issue right now is also recognizing that the theory of change that many of us have embraced, including movements that I've been part of, you know, the one thing we need to do at this moment is just embrace what Albert Einstein once said when he said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting to get different results. So we need to be able to say quite strongly right now, it cannot be business as usual, government as usual, philanthropy as usual, as well as activism as usual. So let me just say, this might sound pessimistic, but it's intended to be optimistic. We need to look for what are the accelerated change strategies. What are the things that we can do that will move us forward positively as fast as possible so that our interventions are aligned with what the science is saying? Because right now there's such a huge gap between what the science is saying and what extreme weather events are saying and what our actions are collectively looking at all sectors. And so therefore, I think right now there has to be an approach where we are looking at not simply addressing the symptoms of problems, we have to be addressing the root causes, the structural and systemic issues that drive different things. And we need to do it in a way that builds on where programs currently are, because I realize foundations can't click the fingers and change overnight. But if you continue to be supporting things in the climate space that is mainly addressing the fall down from climate, then we don't get far. So in the accelerated change strategy that I want to say, and I'm glad ERSTE Foundation, which comes from a bank, is in this conversation so centrally. And let me say, I've thought very hard about it, and the one change that can come fast is and a lot of us have been doing work on this for the last 5 years plus more. The only way I believe we can align that gap is if we shut the flow of capital at source. We have to go after every bank, every lending institution, every pension fund, every foundation's endowment and so on, and say, please, let's redirect our money toward investments that take us closer to the climate cliff, and please let's generate those, redirect those resources to economic initiatives that pull us away from the cliff. And I believe that whether you have $5 or $5 million in a bank account, I've seen this happen in countries where if you aggregate the power of people who are bank holders, for example, bank account holders, it can be deployed to get very fast movement with even the most powerful financial institutions that exist in the world.
Maybe let's get Andreas to respond to that.
Well, I think I look at it even more radical. I agree that financial.
Kumi's happy.
I think that I'm happy to do that.
I agree that financial institutions can play a very, very important role. And the taxonomy that is being constructed for the moment in the EU, which is basically setting the rules for banks on how, and insurance companies, on how they can redirect their financing, is a good thing, and that can develop a lot. But I think we're again making a mistake by trying to combine too many things at the same time. And we're very bad in setting priorities. And my view is that in today, and we put ourselves in that position, the situation is so dramatic that we have no other option but putting the environment as the top priority for all of us. Because whether you die poor or rich because you can't live on this world anymore really doesn't matter. And we're usually doing the same thing that we always do, that we're trying to say, yes, we want to achieve the goal, but by not forgetting all the other goals. So what's done by all political parties, and thanks to Friday for Future, even parties that have nothing to do with climate change now have to jump on it simply because they're scared they're losing the votes of the young people if they don't appear to be green in whatever way. But they're all saying, yep, this is truly important. We have to get the banks, we have to get the companies to really work on decarbonization and achieving our goals, but we have to do that in a socially balanced manner. And we have to take care of the economy. We have to keep the economy rolling. We have to take care of the elderly. We have to take care of this and that. So, it's our priority, but under consideration of all the other goals that we have, which is a very natural thing because politicians cater to too many different views and have to basically satisfy all of them. I think it's a little bit what we're doing for the moment is like, we're the parents of a 17-year-old girl. The girl comes to us and says, look, parents, I would like to be #1 in tennis in 7 years. By the age of 24, I want to be the #1 in tennis. But I still want to have ice cream. I still want to meet my friends. I still want to meet my family. I still want to do this, and I still want to do that. This ain't going to work. If you want to become #1 in that, you have to concentrate full power of that. If we still want to have a chance to save our environment and to live in a world that's livable, to reverse all those things that we did, this has to be #1 priority, and we have to take the consequences. And if we believe we can achieve climate neutrality, in 2050, without social consequences, without economic consequences, which is simply wrong. So we have to name it. We screwed it up because we're much too late, and now we have to do it with full force. And we will have to bear the consequences. And that's where we have to step in. That's where philanthropy has to step in to help politicians, to help the world to hinder the consequences that would automatically come out of it. But if we start from scratch, yes, okay, but we have to give a bonus here, we have to give a bonus there, because they can't afford that kind of diesel prices and they can't afford the carbon. this is not a good start. I don't like it. We need to be a lot more radical.
Thank you. Aby, would you like to maybe respond to that? We screwed up and now we need to fix it. We need to make choices. How does that look from your perspective?
I would agree with the point that if every government in the world put climate change as their top priority, I would certainly believe that philanthropy should redirect itself to address the potential negative consequences in the near term of that particular decision, and that would be fantastic synergy. I'd also love to say that I think we in the philanthropy sector need to be as risk-taking in the thinking as both my fellow panelists. Generally, my sense, and this is a sense based on 6 weeks in the sector, so forgive me for obviously just using those insights to put some hypotheses out there. My sense is that, and many people have said, that philanthropy is the most potentially risk-taking capital. It can be more risk-taking than government, it can be more risk-taking than the commercial sector. I don't think we are. I think I'm not sure, and maybe we can discuss that while we're here, I'm not sure why we have become so afraid of taking dramatic risks. And some of those dramatic risks that are needed in the reshaping of our education systems, our businesses, our investment strategies, etc., that we can potentially fuel. I don't think we're doing that, and I really don't know why. So maybe that's a question to the audience and to all of us. But we need to get there. We need to be risk takers, the risk takers. Shuffle the cards and lead the way.
Super. Let's maybe stay with that topic a little bit, Aby, and I think it's a really good question, and definitely it's one that we'll explore in the next couple of days. And in fact, before you came here to Vienna, we asked you a couple of questions in an online survey. We like to do that at the EFC. And 321 of you kindly responded to that survey. We asked you about philanthropy, in post-COVID times. What are we looking at? And many of you responded that you're worried about funding gaps in terms of half of the globe really facing an uphill battle in terms of getting vaccination, but also challenges in terms of some of the areas that you're investing in not having been covered in the course of the pandemic. But going back to Kumi's point on intersectionality, there was also a clear recognition of the fact that post-COVID we have an opportunity to focus more on the intersectionality of issues, and that you feel that philanthropy needs to be more engaged, more vocal, more responsive and more collaborative. That's quite exciting. So maybe we can ask a question to the audience again. Do you feel that philanthropy really can accelerate sustainable change? If you agree, please raise your hand. If you agree very much, raise both. If you're hesitant, okay, thank you. Now with that, Kumi, let's go back to you. We know you're a big fan of Martin Luther King, and one of the things that I've heard you refer to is how he was hoping for us somehow to create a movement of creative maladjustment. Do you feel that philanthropy can be part of that movement?
So when I was 4 months old, Martin Luther King was giving a speech, and he said, "My friends, as I come to the end of my speech, I want to note that in the field of modern child psychology, there's a very dominant term called maladjusted. Now, all of us want to live a well-adjusted life and not suffer from schizophrenia or other mental illnesses. But my friends, I say to you, there are certain things in our world that are so unjust and immoral that good, decent people should refuse to be well-adjusted to." Then he goes on to say, "I never intend to adjust myself to religious bigotry, to racial discrimination, to the mindless expenditure on military weapons when people don't have food to eat. But on the economy," he says, "I never intend to adjust myself to economic conditions that will take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few when millions of God's children are smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in an affluent society." Now, if that was valid in 1965, that is 1,000 times more valid in the United States as it is everywhere else in the world. But in a longer version of the speech, which is what Delphine is referring to, he says, I now call upon decent men and women around the world to come together to set up a new international organization which never got formed.
It's not too late.
Right? It's not too late. And we probably don't need an organization. We need all of us everywhere in the world, in the different spaces that we're operating, to embrace it. Where he said, we need to set up a new movement called the Movement for Creative Maladjustment. Right? And that is basically people who are saying that we refuse to accept that the world that humanity has created for itself as what we live in right now is the best that humanity can create for itself. You know, I'm sitting here just feeling extremely awkward, to be honest with you, about just feeling my own privilege. As an African who's just been vaccinated, got my second vaccination, which is why I'm able to take up the kind offer from the Robert Bosch Stichting to be a fellow there. I was supposed to come in July. And I mean, if you look at the madness of the thinking with the vaccines, right? I mean, basically, you've got rich countries in the world that are hoarding vaccines, right? As if ignoring Africa, you know what percentage of people are vaccinated in Africa as we speak? 5%, right? And, you know, I had a chance to meet with the German president last week, and I was saying, you know, basically, if you do not show greater solidarity, you make a place like Africa potentially a variant factory, which will then bounce back with new variants, which your current vaccines might not be able to solve. So basically, you know, if I can just abuse my time to make an appeal to the philanthropic sector right now, anything that you can do, anything you can do to support people in the global south, and particularly in Africa right now, because other parts of the global south are not doing so bad compared to Africa, to actually support what the WTO is saying, which is that we need to waiver the patents on vaccines and make it accessible to everybody. I think that's not an act of charity. It's an act of self-interest, and it's an act of common humanity. So I'm sorry if I went out of topic there, but that's basically, I mean, we need to be maladjusted with the idea that companies that get a license to operate from governments can then corner a situation where they suddenly have such massive profit taking, when in fact, by some measure of equity, we can actually get this pandemic under control and we can move on to addressing the multiple other issues that humanity faces. Thank you.
Thank you, Kumi. I think there was a clear call to support that initiative that you're suggesting, indeed. And I'd like to maybe go back to Andreas here. Andreas, I think in the context of everything, we've also seen that philanthropy has been under quite a bit of criticism in terms of our legitimacy. How do you feel about that? What is your view on philanthropy's legitimacy to act?
What shall I say? Some of the absurd theories that have been developed now in the COVID crisis all linger around philanthropy, and that in reality philanthropy sort of is a covert operation to conquer the world by rich people, Jews and whatever. It's absurd, most of those things, but I think where we have to be very careful is on advocacy. So I think one of the things where we should really shy away, even if we believe that we could do something good, is we should, in terms of financial means, philanthropy should never ever touch the political world. Whatever. I mean, we got to stay out of that completely. And other than that, I think this is so really powerful philanthropy, and is becoming an issue in the United States. But some philanthropic organizations are taking political positions. we should stay away from that in Europe. And we have learned in Europe that politicians can change. It's amazing how quickly liberally minded politicians turn into autocratic or illiberal politicians. So we should never ever rely on individuals or political institutions. We should stay away from that. That's, I think, one of the most important things.
Thank you, Andreas. And I'd like to turn to the topic of democracy in a minute, which is also an interesting one that we'll be talking about in the context of the next days. But I'd like to go back to a point that Kumi raised earlier on the importance of humility for foundations and for philanthropy. And maybe that reminded me of a speech you gave when we were last together, which was in Ethiopia, where you addressed a room similar to this one, but with INGOs, and you called upon them to be humble. What is your call towards foundations in that context?
I mean, maybe let me just say that I think, looking around this room, that it's fair to say we have a legitimacy crisis in philanthropy. We have to think deep and hard about who we help us shape our priorities, who we ask to sit at our tables, because we ourselves, as white privileged individuals from Europe, do not hold the truth and all the truth. And I mean, Kumi was mentioning it, but I think it's really important that we own that as the truth and accept that this gives us an incredible legitimacy crisis. I think we can take some advice from one of the most powerful and humblest philanthropists still living, which is Bloomberg, who says we all have to watch out for the ABC crisis: the arrogance, the bureaucracy, and the complacency that comes with any organization. And the larger we get, the more funds we have at our availability, the larger our voice gets, the greater the chance is that our legitimacy gets shot. And owning that humbly, and all the other aspects that I was just mentioning, is part of what we need to use the power, not just of the funds, but use the funds to convene and embrace and invite much larger groups of stakeholders to help shape how we spend our funds and how we use our power. I think it's absolutely essential for us to have the impact that we aspire to have.
Thank you. And I think it's been so, hopeful to see the solidarity that we've seen in the context of the crisis. I mean, when you look at Central and Eastern Europe, where 15% of people started giving, citizens started giving in the pandemic, and 50% more people started volunteering. That's something that we should embrace as foundations and strengthen and support and collaborate with that. Now let's maybe move to Andreas. You touched upon the big topic of democracy in your previous statement. Let's maybe turn to that and ask a question again to the audience. So do you feel that post-corona we have an opportunity to rejuvenate democracy? Again, raise your hands if you agree. Always. Always, says Franz. I like that. Andreas, and you are, of course, also chair of the European Forum ALPAC, which brings together ideas and people to really think about how we can empower a democratic Europe. What is your hope for Europe 20 to 30 years from now, and what are the obstacles that we need to overcome to get there?
How much time do I have?
In a minute and a half, please.
let me try to put it short. We're adding for next year's ALPAC, which hopefully will be pandemic-free ALPAC. We're trying to bring together, again, a lot more scholarship holders from around the world, with people from politics, from business, from science, from arts and the culture, in order, and we're putting on a new subject next year, which is democracy and rule of law, in addition to all the other subjects that we have. So the climate opportunity, financing the future of Europe, and security matters, so immigration and European defense and all those subjects. The real issue why we put on democracy, I think, is because we believe that we just see a deconception of the political system, and we see a complete a lack of a well-defined relation between sort of the European policies and the nation states. And what we experience is that the real issues that Europe has are all issues that are incredibly cross-regional and are all very much interrelated. You cannot, you need an incredibly strong cooperation between different political entities. But the biggest problem that we have is that those things that we need to solve in Europe, and actually those things that we need to solve in the world, are not things that bring votes to political parties at the next election. That's why they don't really care. And to find that right mix on how to push, we need to push political parties into the right direction, and also hate that we always say, it's up to the young people, it's up to the young people. I live in this world now too. I suffer from what's going on in politics like everybody else. And why am I different just because I'm old? So I want my place here too. And unfortunately, I'm old and white, but this is not my fault. I can't fight it. You have to accuse my parents. But I also want to live in a different world, not only the young ones. And I want to do my part for living in a better world. So we have to connect. So we have to connect. So we have to create Friday for Future moments for all the other things that we need to change in Europe. If we let undemocratic and illiberal politicians act the way they do, if they don't feel that there is a real strong force, the young people, the civil society, plus some of the old people together, they tell us very clearly we don't want that. Then they will probably change. And all the things that we have to do between Brussels and all the nation states. I just don't see those things happening unless we exercise a lot more pressure and become a lot more outspoken. And that simply, it requires a lot of work. It requires a lot of getting together. Events like this here today is a wonderful example on how we can get stronger. We have such a strength, but we don't cooperate well enough. We need more. We just need to align on what we do. So this is wonderful here. We should have conferences like that, maybe twice a year. We should all go to Alpbach for a week to discuss on what we should do. We need to make sure that politicians feel there's a really strong civil society. They need us to change. If we don't change, they will not vote for us again.
Thank you. And still, I mean, AB, going back to you, I think as a politician, it's so hard to get re-elected if you have a just agenda, isn't it? How do you do that as a politician? What would be your advice to the mayors of Riga and Budapest that will be speaking with us later?
At the end of the day, I mean, I was actually also a city politician. I was on the Copenhagen Council when I was really young, and when I might as well have been out on the streets fighting for social justice. I think ultimately politicians essentially need to not care whether they get re-elected, not make it a living, make it a passion, make it a cause, make it about the values that you stand for. And certainly the politicians I know that have lived and breathed that have been re-elected time and time again. So I would say that. Can I just say one thing, because I know we're probably coming to the end, but that is just to link it a little bit to sort of the personal passion and values that brought me to where I am today, 6 weeks into a job with the Lego Foundation, and which is also why I started with the issue of values. You know, we are not the owners and holders, regardless of our religion, of our birthplace, of our of where we sit today. You know, the shared humanity and the willingness and drive for solidarity beyond your communities and beyond borders, etc., exists absolutely everywhere. When I think of some of the humanitarian grants that I've given in my professional life, remembering that the first response to people in need, the first response to any injustice always comes from next door. It's always the neighbor. And if we as philanthropists can also help politicians, etc., think about the local, fueling that local response to injustice, to climate change, to renewing education, anything, I think that is something that can bring us together, that we hold on to the fact that people want solidarity and humanity, and it's our actions and our values and our behaviors and walking the talk that will make that world come alive.
Absolutely. I think walking the talk, and with that also having values to the extent that, Kumi, going back to you, that we need to love the people that voted for Trump and for Brexit, and we need to vote to love the ones that voted for, also for breakfast. I vote for breakfast every day. The ones that voted for Brexit and for and for Orbán. How do we get to love them, and why do we need to love them?
So just if you're wondering, Delphine is not lecturing me and saying we need to love the people who voted for Trump. It's what I said controversially as the Secretary General of Amnesty. I said, you know, activism cannot simply be saying what you're saying and getting the people who agree with you already mobilized, and you get 10%, right? Activism has to be about broadening the communications and dialogue with those that we disagree with. Unless, in the United States, we learn to love the people who voted for Trump, and I genuinely mean that, understand their vulnerabilities and the insecurities that allow them to be manipulated to vote against their own interests in many cases, right? And same with Brexit. Our friends in Britain, can tell you already the sort of head scratching that is happening in terms of the implications already that people are seeing, right? But this all brings me to a conclusion on democracy that says that in far too many countries, we have the form of democracy without the substance of democracy. What has happened is basically we have defined democracy solely as holding elections. However flawed those elections are, however manipulated the media environment was and so on, we just tick off a box saying democracy achieved because we had an... And let me just say to philanthropy that if there is something that you're seriously thinking about investing in to improve democracy, it's about addressing this tyranny that we have right now, the tyranny of misinformation and lies. Because I am convinced from all my work, and I've had the privilege to be in the majority of countries in the world over the last 3-4 decades, I'm convinced that the majority of people want gender equality. The majority of people want peace. The majority of people want everybody to be educated, everybody to have health, and so on, and to address the climate crisis. And if you look at the politicians that are getting elected in the name of democracy, you look at the UK, Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party have 1/3 of the people that voted for them. Same with Modi in India, right? Same with Trump in, if you look at it in terms of, the way the system works there and so on. So basically there are many countries where politicians are making calculations for saying that the way we can get elected is we create a them versus us situation, right? And that's the frightening, that's why I said in my opening comments, we need to be aware that there are fascist tendencies that are emerging in the body politic in many countries, where one of the ways in which you get support is by attacking those that are different, whether based on language, race, religion, and so on. And so I think a worthwhile investment of philanthropy is looking at the media environment to ensure that people have a genuine access to a diversity of opinions, and that where absolute lies are being spoken, those lies need to be shut down so that people can make informed decisions. And I believe if we do that, most people will vote in sensible ways and not vote for some of the crazies that we have in power at the moment.
Thank you, Kumi. And I think that brings us very nicely to the end. I think, Francis, we have one more minute. Maybe take 1 more minute. Going back to Kumi's closing or end words here, we've talked a bit about democracies that are failing and the challenges that we're seeing there. We talked about the climate crisis and the cliff we're basically standing in front of as humanity. We talked about inequality that has unfortunately only aggravated dramatically in the context of the crisis. I mean, that's a pretty tough reality to wake up to every morning, isn't it? So I'd like to ask you, before we leave the stage, what gives you hope? Where do you get your energy? Andreas, would you like to start?
I have to start? Okay. What gives me hope? What gives me hope is that I am an optimist, that I believe we can change things. I personally believe that populism is one of the worst things that we experience for the moment, and the only way you can combat populism is through education and getting together and talking. So as the corona crisis is over, I think we as philanthropic organizations need to just engage a lot more and try to influence and get together with all kinds of people, also with people who think different from us. What gives me hope is that if you have the time and if you're being given a chance, you can convince people who believe in wrong things, like illiberality or the fact that vaccines are dangerous or stupid things like that. If you have the time, if you've been given the time to talk to them, you can change people, you can influence them. We have a lot more to say and to bring to this world than we actually do. I think what we're really bad in is communication. And I really believe we should work on that. And if we do that, I have tons of hope.
Super.
So I get hope from old people like Andreas saying the things that they are saying, older people. And really, I take a lot of hope from young people around the world. I mean, young people are actually doing some of the things that Andreas just said, but I think they have a capability of imagining things about how things can be different in a way those of us that have lived within the flawed systems that we've lived under find it harder to imagine. And I think I would just endorse what André is saying. The biggest investment we need to be making right now is in educating people so that they can take control over their lives, they have a greater sense of knowledge and awareness when they're making decisions. And again, we need to recognize that we can communicate so much better than we do, right? We just have to get serious about it. And we need to, when I say humble ourselves, we need to also just recognize that we need to go to where people are, understand where the conversations are at the moment, and make sure we're connected in it. Because I think this whole notion of activism where we as activists think that we are the holders of absolute truth and all we need to do is just preach all the time is a flawed concept. That we have to humble ourselves, engage in dialogue and win people over through that way. And I'm optimistic that it can be done. I would say the thing that terrifies me is that unlike any other issue that we face, gender equality and so on, there is a clock with the climate that's ticking in the center of the table, and we are 1 minute to midnight. And that's what worries me. So we have to get all our interventions to align with the science and what the clock is saying about how fast we need to move.
Absolutely. Maybe, what gives you hope?
Well, I get some hope right now from two panelists that also emphasize that reshaping learning and education is part of the future, obviously very, very close to my heart. I do get hope from science. Look what we have achieved together. I mean, where we started today, why we can be here, etc. I do also get hope from a small calculation that was done on the back of an envelope in my office, that if every single foundation in the world and every single government in the world gave just 5% more to the global vaccine effort, we could actually manage complete rollout and coverage in Africa. So that's a very hopeful statistic that I hope you all take away. I get hope, as everybody else, from the kids and young people we work with every day, but I also get hope when I see people my age, and we just have to accept that we change our minds slower than most, when we change our minds. And when we move and when we shift against what the neurons in our head allow us to. So we go against the physics and the science that has built who we are today and say, no, actually, I can step out of my comfort zone and do something different than what I did yesterday. That gives me huge hope.
That's absolutely great. I think that's really nice to end with. And I think, going back to some of the points that were made also about kids, when my son was 6, it was at the end of 2015, which wasn't the brightest year for the world with migration and what have you. And at the end of the year, we were talking about, looking back and what happens in 2016. And my 6-year-old son then said, why are you worried? And I said, well, because... And he responded, but Mom, people have had another year to learn about respect. So definitely next year is going to be better. So I think that if a 6-year-old can have that kind of hope for the world, we have a responsibility to share that and to make sure that we contribute to indeed making it better and to make every day count, every minute, because we don't have that much time ahead of us. So thank you so much to all of you for being here, and thank you very much to our panelists, Andreas, Kumi, Evi, thank you. And if I may now invite the chair of our program committee, Franz, to join us on stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Delphine. Does it work? Yes, it does. Thank you, Delphine. Thank you all for this really challenging panel. We are coming now to those that have been, in a way, heavily, let me say, mentioned during this debate, to the politicians. Those who are actually charged by the sovereign, by all of us, to implement what our ideas and dreams and hopes and visions are. And we would like to hear from 2 representatives, we have invited them here, how they are going about that. 2 representatives who, as AB has said, are working in cities. They're mayors of 2 European cities. Capital cities, the cities where this, what AB mentioned, the neighborhood support, the neighborhood as the first instance of solidarity, is supposed to work, and is working in many cases. And this is what they, as politicians, have to work with. We want to welcome them as representatives also of this strong force that was mentioned during the debate here, that is standing up against illiberal societies, illiberal policies, illiberal tendencies, authoritarian tendencies in our country. They are coming from open European liberal green parties that work towards European renewal and integration. And of course, we are curious to hear what they are going to say to us about their work, their views, their take on this situation, and how they see also perhaps the potential between the political world and working together with the political world and the philanthropic world. And I would like first to introduce Mr. Gergely Karácsony. He is the mayor of the city of Budapest and the co-leader of the Dialogue for Hungary party, a green party that is represented in the Hungarian parliament. Mr. Karácsony has worked in the private industry as a public and market opinion research company. And he has also been a political advisor in that capacity already for the prime ministers who preceded the first preceded the second Orban government. He was he's a lecturer at the Corvinus University of Budapest, and he's been elected to the National Assembly in 2010. From 2014 on, he served for 5 years as the mayor of one of the districts, the 14th district of Budapest, and was elected the mayor of the city of Budapest in October 2019. Among many other things that he's been doing, he initiated something very interesting. He initiated the Pact of Free Cities. The 4 Visegrad country capitals, Budapest, Bratislava, Prague, and Warsaw, and all countries that are, in the sense, dominated by in degrees, authoritarian, illiberal, conservative governments, and capital cities ruled by open-minded liberal parties. And this interesting and close cooperation between mayors of European cities, capitals, aims at mutual support and exchange on issues ranging from good practices of urban development, mitigating the housing crisis, or the effects of global warming. Mr. Karácsony, we are ready to hear about your take on the subjects, and we're grateful that you're here tonight, not this afternoon. Well, actually, it's morning, sorry. It's so dark in here, I'm thinking it's night already. Come on. It's morning. Please, come on stage. What am I saying?
Honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to be here in Vienna today to address the European Foundation Center's Annual Conference. Let me bring you the perspective of a green European mayor on sustainable democratic change. For us mayors, addressing today's key challenges mean all the difference between the working and the failing city. And it's time of the crisis, the difference between life and death. This is especially true in Budapest and many other cities where the progressive city administration must deal with an anti-democratic and illiberal government. Let me give you an example. Since the outbreak of the pandemic, the Hungarian government has been cutting our revenues, rendering us unable to respond to the crisis. It was with the help of the Open Society Foundation that the City Hall conducted its own free COVID testing. This way, we managed to limit the spread of the virus, potentially saving the life of many. It is therefore extremely important that positive forces from different backgrounds, including the philanthropic and public sectors, work together to create a sustainable and just future. It is a global trend that cities gain an ever-increasing role, both in protecting democracy and fighting the environmental crisis. Cities are and must be the forefront of these efforts, simply because they are well suited to do so. They have large multicultural populations that cherish freedom and diversity and can counter to liberal wave. Local level politicians also have the advantages of being in the direct contact with other voters outside their own political base. They can function as a bridge between people and politics. And they can prove wrong the populist narrative that politics is done by the small elite promoting their own private interest. Cities are also home about the 75% of all Europeans. They have a heavy share in the greenhouse gas emissions, and they are also most vulnerable to negative climate impacts. And for same reasons, cities can contribute greatly to climate mitigation. But let me stress one point. The progressive reforms must never come only from above. Civic engagement and participation are key to reforming our democracy and creating a better future. Here too, cities play a crucial role as they can easily encourage democratic participation and including their citizens in the local decisions. People want to involve the practice of direct democracy can tackle and widespread discontent with representative democracy. Let me mention just a few important examples from Budapest. Last year, we have launched a participatory budgeting project, allocating 3 million euros for citizens to decide where they want to spend that money. In a climate policy, it's even more important to involve citizens. That is why we organized the Budapest Climate Assembly. Here, citizens discussed potential climate measures with experts and identify their preferences. These were that incorporated in Budapest climate strategy adopted by the City Council. In addition, the increasingly civic engagement, international cooperation is also key to solving our current challenges. Alliances and cross-border cooperation are extremely important at the time when the global challenges affect us all. In December 2019, we formed our Pact of Free Cities network together Bratislava, Prague and Warsaw. Our main motivation was to represent the millions of people in our region to reject populistic nationalism and together stand up for inclusive democracy. Our pact also lobbying the European institution to allocate direct city funding from the EU budget from green objectives. We did this because we think that cities must be key players in Europe's green transition. What started out as a region city initiative has become a global network. This September, the mayors of 21 large cities enjoyed the Pact of Free Cities, including the mayors of Vienna, London, Paris, Taipei, and Los Angeles. Together, we form an open and value-based network that protects democratic values and promotes progressive urban agenda. The Pact of Free Cities is not our only major international initiative. Last month, we organized Budapest Forum, a Building Sustainable Democracy conference. It's brought together a wide range of stakeholders to present workable solutions for most pressing policy challenges. Budapest Forum is yet another example of the cooperation between the public and the philanthropic sectors, as the main sponsor of the forum was the ERSTE Foundation. We also formed the Budapest Global platform to work together with the international companies and local knowledge institutions. The goal of the platform is to attract talent, drive innovation, and expand Budapest's international outlook. In summary, cities will define how we manage the democratic, social, and environmental challenges of the 21st century. They can lead the way both in renewing and protecting democracy and boosting the transition towards a green and just future. But for cities to be successful, they must build and rely on strong alliances across borders, sectors, and ideologies. Budapest wants to be at the forefront of these efforts, not only for the well-being of its citizens, but also of a global responsibility. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Karácsony. I think we are all looking towards you and your very courageous way in which you are standing up against the limitations, the attacks of an authoritarian, illiberal political system. And that's just a very small thing that I would like to tell you. You know that Mr. Orbán is planning to bring a huge Chinese university to Budapest. and with this cement the Chinese influence in these countries even more, and it's a geopolitical issue. And the little answer that I find great is that they are now, upon the initiative of the mayor, a free Hong Kong street, a Dalai Lama street, and an Uyghur martyr street in Budapest, just to show that there is resistance. So I'm very happy now to introduce our second speaker, the mayor of Riga, Mr. Mārtiņš Staķis. He is the founder of the Liberal Party Movement 4 in Latvia, and is now in a coalition with the Latvians Development for Latvia's Development Party. He is in Parliament, or was in Parliament since 2018, and was elected mayor of Riga just a year ago. So you're celebrating in a way your anniversary here with us in Vienna. He's leading a coalition of 6 parties, which is not an easy thing. He is a trained economist, he worked in private industry, and is also the owner of several coffee houses in Riga. So I hope he appreciates that we here in Vienna are also inviting you to coffee houses. He was a TV show host, he was serving in the Latvian National Guard, and is also involved in youth education through an organization called MOT. Something interesting, if I may say that, he is also the founder of a choir and is still actively participating in that choir. And he has been on the board of the Lutheran St. Gertrude Old Church in Riga, a church that, as I read in Wikipedia, of course, has been 6 times destroyed and 6 times rebuilt. So it teaches probably not just Mr. Staķis, but many of us, a lesson in resilience over the centuries that this church has been destroyed, renewed again, stood up again, and I think this is something to take heart from. Facing the challenging political setup in his home city after 30 years of transition from a communist social to an open liberal society and a market-based economy, Mayor Staķis is facing not only an ethnic divide in his city between the Latvian and the Russian inhabitants of Riga, but also the demands of climate change, of the pandemic, which is very rapidly rising, unfortunately, in his country currently. So we are very curious to hear now from you what your take is on the things you've heard today, on your challenges you're facing in your job. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And first of all, let me say how excited I am to be here to talk with such an inspiring audience as you are in the city of Vienna, which has been named as the best quality of life 10 years in a row. And Delphine was asking what gives energy, so I really get energy to be among you. So thank you for this opportunity. So dear delegates, dear guests and organizers, before I start, let me a little bit introduce you with myself, my country, my city. So yes, we regained our independence in 1991, so we are quite new democracy, only for 30 years. And looking back on those 30 years, I really much better understand why was Israel cursed 40 years in wilderness. Because everybody wants a change, but we sometimes miss the leaders who are ready to lead the change and change our habits. It really takes a lot of time. Yeah, I was born in Soviet Union, and my generation is first generation of entrepreneurs, first generation who buy and sell property, and we will be the first generation who will give out the legacy to our children. And 2 weeks ago, yes, we were celebrating 1 year of my administration, and this conference gave me a really nice opportunity just to go through the year and understand what we have done and what we have learned. So let me share it now with you. So I view the city administration as a key player to better engage citizens in a democratic process. And in this way, we gain not only legitimacy, but also thousands of good ideas and great helpers. And if large changes are planned, They must be implemented in close coordination between the political administration and residents of the city. In Riga, this is what we are doing since the new administration was elected last year. And you know, I come from the small town, 60 kilometers from Riga. We were less than 2,000 residents in a village, and about 20,000 in a city, and we felt as a community. It was my village, it was my city. So now Riga is 7,100 people living there, and 1 million in the metropolis area, and 300,000 are not the native Latvian speaking, and they speak a Russian family or other languages. So are we community, and how to build this feel of community? So this was our first challenge. So in our answer to that was neighborhoods. We should put more focus on the neighborhoods, what wasn't done before. So in the yearly 2021, Riga went through the large reorganization. We took our bureaucratic city administrative institution and reorganized them into neighborhood coordination centers. The purpose was for us to move closer to Riga residents, to talk with them directly and give them the ability to work with the municipality in a more human way. Before that, people thought that you had to go and talk to the mayor directly. Only then could you see the real action being taken. Of course, I'm happy to engage with anyone, but this is needless to say, this is not the best system. So now, coordinators with teams are working directly with the residents of various neighborhoods, Facebook groups where people can ask questions and report problems, and proactive initiatives from coordinators to improve the neighborhoods. And my findings are the human face makes all the difference. If you know who is your coordinator and you see that they are a real person, you are more likely to see the city accessible and opened. And the centralized development planning often misses key issues that real residents in specific neighborhoods care about. Only the loudest are heard, while others are lost in translation. Therefore, it's vital to talk to residents directly. Also in 2021, we created a new budget program to financially support civic NGOs. The organizations that work to improve the living conditions in specific neighborhoods. Riga has 30 such NGOs, and we hope this will encourage more people to join them and create new ones. The key idea is not that only civically active cities can become prosperous, and that people need to take initiative into their own hands. I was studying in Helsinki, and I really love the Finnish approach. They were calculated that every single civic active person are ready to give 16 hours monthly to the city or to the government. So let's calculate now on average salary of Latvia. It could be 882 million euros a year, about the same budget as we have in Riga. So I think this is a simple calculation. If only 10% of the population become civil active, we could give about 82 million in a year. If we increase it percent by percent, so it's really worth to invest in civil society and in NGOs. That's what I truly believe. But visiting people, of course, is a mandatory for every politician also. You often will hear things you will not like, but you need to hear them nonetheless. So I'm happy that we managed to organize a cycle of Riga neighborhood visits during my first year. There were open events where people had the chance to ask the mayor questions for 2 hours, and it was broadcasted online. Hearing people ask questions and comment on real issues they are facing is very important for the democratic process. And even if I was not able to answer their questions, I know that these questions and comments will help me to make better decisions throughout my entire mayorship. In my first visit, there was 3 young persons sitting in a first row waiting for the moment to ask the questions. And then they raised their hands and they were asking not very pleasant questions to me. And I saw they were reading that from their smartphones. So after the meeting, I came to them by saying how happy I am that they are here that also youngsters, they were maybe 15, 16, want to participate in city life and improve life for the citizens and make life better. Next day, again, they was in the first row, raising hand and asking these unpleasant questions to me again. But this time I publicly tell that's how happy I am, and look on those youngsters. They are the role players for all of us, how we need to involve in the city and so on. I didn't saw them in any other meetings. But 2 weeks ago I received a letter from one of them, and they confessed that they was sent as a spies for opposition to spoil my events. Besides, I was open to them, and they said that they want to join my team. So I got 3 new volunteers. So last but not least, we are actively using participatory budget, as Budapest doing, by the way, as well, where citizens can submit project ideas that everyone can vote for. Recreation areas, outdoor pools, basketball court, the residents themselves offer these projects and the residents themselves vote for them. The only thing politicians have to do is implement the projects that have received the most support. Currently, we have only one program for Riga. This means only the most active and populous neighborhoods can get their ideas supported. So in the future, we want to have the specific budget program for each neighborhood. And it is believed that cities only need to clean the sidewalks, right? To this I answer that of course sidewalks are very important, and we will gonna clean them in the future as well. But there are cases when cities can do more and become more involved in global processes to strengthen the freedom and democracy. So in May, the International Ice Hockey Championship took place in Riga. I hope there is some fans of ice hockey as well. Seeing that Lukashenko regime in Belarus hijacked the international passenger plane and abducted the journalist who was flying over the airspace, I decided to act rather than stay silent. So we raised the white, red, white, free Belarus flag along the flags of championship participants in the city. And this received some backlash, but was very popular among Belarus opposition. It monetarily breathed a new spark in the opposition movement. So in my view, cities don't have to stay silent, and city mayors can have an impact. Just be careful. The Belarusian regime has launched an investigation against me. I'm persona non grata in Russia as well. So this means you are now being addressed by alleged criminal in Belarus. Sorry for that. About the climate. So today, good urban governance is not possible without attention to climate issues. However, climate issues in Latvia have never been at the forefront to election campaigns. That's why, when I said in my campaign that Riga should become the first climate-neutral city in the Baltics, many laughed. They say they want to get involved in rescue polar bears. But, to everyone's surprise, most people realize that climate neutrality is about a clean air, a harmonious, quiet environment, lower bills for people, in energy-efficient homes, and stable future for our children and grandchildren. And if these efforts also help to save polar bears, I have no objection to that either. So that is why I'm proud of the first election campaign in Latvia, where the victory was achieved by putting the climate at the forefront. I was recently in a Harvard Bloomberg City Leader program and met, by the way, the Mr. Bloomberg. He's really great mayor, great person. And everything, and there was 40 mayors from around the world. And the key learnings were this. So mayors who lead the impact can only do that if they make the hardest decision in the first 2 years. So that is why I'm trying to do that now. So in the past, Riga has always been a city of the car owners. Everything in the city was designed in a way to make it comfortable to own a car. But it's clear that with a global climate challenge, this is no longer possible. And for Riga to become a modern metropolis, hard changes have to be made. And making traffic calmer and safer personally matters to me. We should not lose any lives on the streets of the town, and I know what a tragedy it is. So 2 years ago, on the December 30, I took my smartphone and called my family, my sister, my mom, my relatives, by saying that their beloved father and grandfather and 2 more people was hit on the street. And in a city where their load speed was 50 kilometers an hour, unfortunately they died. And no one has to die on the town traffic. No one has to fear walking on the streets, and I think it is our common thing. And I fully support that in the big cities, the maximum speed should be not more than 30 kilometers per hour. So with the European Union planning funds, we have now drawn up to 300 million plan for the development of green mobility and environmentally friendly public transport in Riga. This will let Riga to get funding for green mobility points, a low emission zone, new metro bus line, new bike lines, and new tram line connections. Having this funding available to us has forced us to do a lot of drastic changes very quickly. For example, green mobility points ask us to prioritize the green public transportation and move away from the regular buses. A metro bus line gives us a new fast public transportation connection, and new bike lines allow us to finally connect the city center with the faraway neighborhoods. And I think this is a great example of how a city can jumpstart important changes to tackle climate change and also convince people to implement them. In my view, the green development is the only way forward for cities. If we want to continue to use EU funding as a key tool to drive development, this is the only way. So we must go green if we want to choose development instead of stagnation. So dear friends, what is the moral of this story? And I think this is about a story about the choices. I have a choice between the safest way, maybe postpone unpopular changes, patiently collecting popularity points, and maybe even get re-elected next time. But this scenario I would call stagnation, and I could never look in your eyes if I would choose this scenario. And another scenario is to act quickly without any delays, and I would call this scenario per aspera ad astra. And I am here to reach the stars. So thank you for your attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mayor Staķis, for these encouraging and then hopeful words. We have a time problem, a little bit. Lunch is waiting, so what I would like to do next is to introduce to you 4 exceptional women. They have been the ones preparing the content of this conference. We are doing this conference differently. You're all part of an experiment that we are trying this time. It's an experiment in focusing on the critical issues. Rather than having, excuse the expression, a beauty contest of foundations during the conference, we want to focus where we need to focus. We want to really look at the topics that are of concern to us, to the whole society, to humanity. And we have found, as I said, 4 exceptional women to do that for us, who will now introduce themselves, and they will come and briefly explain what it is that you can expect during the next 2 half days, this afternoon and tomorrow morning, in their tracks, in their thematic tracks in climate, society, democracy, and philanthropy. And I'm really grateful for you to be there. And I'm very grateful also to the EFC Secretariat and Delphine in particular, because just imagine, I mean, you are called into as a new executive director of a large umbrella organization, and you come into your job finding a ready-made conference that you're supposed to implement. This was difficult for her, and I think you managed this greatly. And of course, it was helped in the sense by the pandemic, because that delayed everything. So we had a bit of time, and Delphine and her team had a bit of time to get involved with the moderators, to really shape again the content that they had been preparing already since a year, because of course we started after the Paris conference 2019. So I think this was a great cooperation. Thank you, Delphine, for putting the stamp on it together with your staff, and we'll call them afterwards. I will now ask all four of you, come on stage and present yourself and your topic briefly, so that we know what's in store for us in the next 2 days. You can stand, I think. We won't take much time anyway. Lakshmi, would you like to start?
Sure. I'm Lakshmi Sundaram. I'm the Interim Executive Director of Open Democracy. And unsurprisingly, I'm going to talk about the democracy track, which we've already heard quite a lot about today. So my background is actually in global health and gender equality. And I must admit that previously, when colleagues of mine would talk about, the demise of democratic institutions, I used to think they were being a bit alarmist, compared to the real issues that I was working on. I have to say that I don't think that anymore. And obviously, you heard about some of the problems that our democratic institutions are facing, that they've been facing for decades, but that have been exacerbated, particularly with the COVID crisis. We've had attacks on free and independent media, misinformation is rife, politically motivated assassinations are happening all over the place, blocks to civil society, again, in Europe and across the world, usually with a disproportionate impact on women and people from marginalized groups. In the democracy track, we're going to examine some of these forces and trends, but crucially, we're going to talk about how we can push back and get democracy back on track. Now, we're going to have sessions that not only look at the big picture forces and how they all interconnect with each other and with the other tracks of the conference. We're going to hone in on independent media. We're going to talk about the critical importance of grassroots communities, and we're going to look at technology, not only the problems that we're seeing with technology, but also how amazing activists have been using technology for good and how philanthropic institutions can help support them. And in true democratic fashion, we're expecting loads of energizing conversations, challenges, debates, and a bit of grist in the discussion, because that's where the best ideas emerge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Liz McKeon, and I lead climate action at the IKEA Foundation. And as I was arriving in Vienna last night, there were 3 topics on my mind to help frame this discussion that we're going to have over the next few days. We've heard a lot already this morning, so I'm glad that they track with some of the earlier comments, actually. The first topic was how we get past 2%. This is something that Delphine mentioned. And if you haven't yet seen it, I really commend to you this amazing analysis that resulted, it was published last week, by a collaboration between EFC, The Hour is Late, and Climate Works Foundation. And it tracks where European philanthropies are contributing on climate, and the sad news is 2%. Now, the analysis was rigorous, but I also know how many foundations I speak to, and I know the awareness is there. I know the desire for action is there. I look across this room, and I know that you do not believe 2% of lives are worth saving, or 2% of the planet is worth saving. And that is exactly why we must have this conversation here now, because we have to be sure that we are attributing what we are contributing. And I'm looking forward to that. The second thing that was on my mind was gratitude, because over the next few days, you are going to hear in this track some amazing speakers who are going to help us connect all the dots on food, clothing, shelter, the air that we breathe. Because every single one of us has a role. If you fund refugees, you are thinking about climate. If you fund homelessness, nutrition, child's rights, it is all interconnected, as has been said. And the question is how we make that more intentional and use our voice and philanthropy to draw those dots for others. The final thing that was on my mind is a term that is now becoming all too familiar in scientific literature and medical literature, and that is the term climate anxiety. And it is a term used to describe how the younger generation is feeling about their future. Imagine the despair that is gripping a young person when they cannot imagine or cannot break free of that. Now, if COVID has taught us any lessons, it has been that vulnerability can turn on a dime in a heartbeat. But it has also told us that when we take a step back, our resilience and our fortitude can also be strengthened. And so I know we all need, as has already been said, the young people of this world. We need their creativity, we need their stewardship for people and planet in the future. And so we must address this climate anxiety. And so I am hoping that we can consider, if you'll forgive the play on words, our foundations as working together to set their foundation for the future. So please join us. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Lucy Bernholz. I'm here from the Stanford University Center on Philanthropy and Civil Society in the Digital Civil Society Lab, and let me start by saying how lovely it is to be outside of the United States. Over the past 40 years, accelerating significantly in the last 10, a force of our own making, of humans' own making, has been steadily, powerfully, and relentlessly rearranging our economies, our centers of political power, our individual and family lives, and philanthropy and civil society. I am not talking only of global warming, but of our dependencies on digital systems. And I am not talking only of the ways that we communicate, but also of the ways that we participate, be that in politics or in our community lives, how we move from place to place, when and how we educate our children and ourselves, how we manage our cities, and how we run our economies. The effects of these digital dependencies on our institutions, and here I mean, yes, foundations, but also schools, hospitals, care centers, public life, finance, news, you name it, is massive. We are living and working in a time when our institutions, laws, and social norms are transitioning from analog assumptions to fully digital ones. It is the equivalent of taking buildings that were built on firm, solid land, putting pontoons and a sail on them, and pushing them out to sea, and calling them boats. They're not boats. Everything underneath us has shifted, and so must we. The philanthropy track begins by examining these digital dependencies, and then we will engage directly with the questions of philanthropic legitimacy that have been mentioned this morning. We're going to learn from those who are implementing practices that are designed to shift power in philanthropy, from participatory grant making to digital data trusts. Along the way, we're also going to learn several ways to adapt and plan and stay light-footed, skills that marginalized communities have always needed, have always demonstrated, and they are thus expert in, and that more established land-based institutions such as foundations are only now starting to recognize. Now, I have to admit that being asked to design a philanthropy track at a foundation conference is a little bit meta, as we say in California. But our goal is to help you all change your work. I'll borrow from Kumi, to leave here as creatively maladjusted philanthropists to help our planet, society, and our democracies. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Claire from Fondation de France, and I've been I have the pleasure to put together the society track, and we've done this together with the amazing EFC teams and the thematic groups. And I must say the difficult part of this has been to not start the debate before the debate and not start the conversation before the conversation. We're having great panelists, and really we're going to explore with them in this very difficult time indeed that we're going through, how we're all coming out of the pandemic, how the world is coming out of the pandemic with increased challenges and increased dangers. So in the society track, we're going to, first of all, explore who the dividers and connectors are, not only in European societies, but also elsewhere, and how we can use and explore the possibilities to leverage and have possibilities to engage people more based on those analyses, and how foundations navigate this volatile and complex world. So this is going to be our first panel. The second panel is going to be about how foundations can actually act as connectors and build bridges and create maybe safe spaces in this time where fragmentation and division is running high. The third panel is going to be about how to engage people in order to create sustainable and meaningful actions. And we're going to look at this from the point of view of migrants, of people with disabilities, and women. And the fourth panel is going to be looking at more prospective aspects and what's ahead of us, and in particular, how do we need to prepare for the future from the point of view of education, from the point of view of technology, because technology obviously is largely part of our future world, and from the point of view of local development, and in particular, we're going to explore how third places are a way to maybe look for future and creative options. So we're definitely hoping to have very dynamic and creative debates. We're going to disagree, hopefully agree, and hopefully disagree, because I think that's going to be interesting to have this variety of opinions. Give each other ideas and give each other courage, because obviously we're going to need it. I think my biggest frustration will be to not be able to attend your panels, because it's actually going to be really interesting. And the point is to actually be interconnected, and yes, of course, all of what we're going to tackle is going to be important to move towards systemic change. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the fantastic work you've put in. I guess it turned out to be much more than we originally thought it would be. So thank you very much for that. I also wanted to thank, really by name, the people in the EFC Secretariat: Giulia Lombardi, Stefanos Oikonomou, Ilaria Dauria, Silvia Balmas, Alice Forsman, and Vivian Todd, who have been really working very hard together with you on this. You will see them, I guess, in the groups, in the panels. And we have also a support from the Central European University. You may know the Central European University had to move from Budapest. They moved to Vienna. And we have 8 wonderful students who have not only been volunteering to support the moderators here in Vienna, but they've also looked into the topics, and they have produced readers that are available in your app, in the document session. At the bottom of each of the sessions, you'll find the readers for the 4 topics, and there will be also QR codes in the rooms that you can download them directly. So look at that. It contains a lot of different material, very insightful material, helpful material for the 4 tracks. So thank you very much. And now, and you will meet the students in the rooms as well. Now, I think we all have to jog through the park to get ready for lunch. And all other announcements will come later on. At 2:30, we are meeting in the 4 rooms in the Hilton Hotel. And tonight, buses will all take you to the Fine Arts Museum for the evening reception and dinner. Thank you.